in all the schools across Marion County, but some schools are just going to be like, we're just not going to. And then why aren't we having a conversation about lead at home? Because anyway, so this is an issue of mine. This is a concern of mine. I think that when you're dealing with the achievement gap, it's not a situation where you just blame the teachers. You can't just blame the kids. There's a village that kind of has to be operating. But I'm not going to just, say, oh, well, we're just going to blame it on some external factors and not hold our kids accountable for doing what they need to do.
So I found that, let me read this before y'all weigh in. I found his quote this is former CEO of Teach for America. We think the cause of differences are unequal and inadequate educational opportunities, not inherent differences in capability or character. And so, I've seen the data.
Yeah.
But as I started looking at it more from that perspective of the achievement gap does kind of place the blame on the student and says, well, black students aren't inherently smart as white students. And so when you look at it from the opportunity side, it goes back to addressing inequities, especially when it comes to funding, and urban schools receive less funding. And so often don't have access to technology as other schools do. So when you look at it from that standpoint of, I could see his point of, it's not about capability or character. It's about the inadequate education opportunities versus the different. So, I mean, it's up for discussion. So Everybody has their view on it.
I'm gonna try to stop because I feel like I talk too much, but I'm gonna
have
to
go ahead.
In.
Say what you need to say.
So the first thing you have to understand is that intelligence and attainment of skills or achievement are two very different things, right? Everybody at this table is intelligent, but if I ask you to bring some raw materials in this room and build an iPhone, none of us could do it.
Right. You're
Plain
right.
and simple, right? So we're gonna miss that achievement mark, right? The achievement gap for our students is very real.
Okay.
Yes.
So you believe
real.
it's an achievement gap and not opportunity?
Very real.
Okay.
I believe there is an achievement gap and an opportunity gap.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
There's both of them. They don't.
They don't.
They
It's not one or the other.
They work together.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
They work together. He got to sell something. Exactly. It's a cause and effect.
That's marketing.
He's got to sell something. Our kids are not achieving in these schools, and this is a test of minimum basic skills. Let's be real about that. Right? This is math. This is addition and subtraction. This is linear equations. We're not talking about anything special. We're talking about reading on grade level. Ain't nobody reading Tolstoy on none of these tests, right? We're reading basic stuff, right? And so if our kids cannot do this, we have to look at everything. A part of it is opportunity.
Yes.
A part of it is opportunity.
Yes.
A part of it starts before the school. Now, what I believe the opportunity does, it puts all the blame squarely on the school. Some of this is societal. Some of the teacher doesn't walk into a school outside of the school, thinks that a black kid is a genius, walks inside of the school and think the black kid is not. That teacher thought the black kid was dumb before they walked in there.
You better say that.
Right? And so when we talk about the opportunity gap, and he's talking about we need to put this on the schools and not put it on the students. First of all, I don't think you can blame anything on students. Us as adults need to take respect, right? We need to take responsibility for that. But I would say for us to imagine a world, something made up in our head, something made up in his head, where a teacher has had no bias and then walked into a school, all of a sudden bias was created? Absolutely not. That teacher been racist.
Right.
That teacher's parents was racist. When we look at all these lynching photos, some of these folks' grandparents was up in there.
Yeah.
Right? Who was they raised by?
Right. No.
Let's just be real.
Yeah.
Who was they raised by?
You're right.
Right?
Right.
And some of that lingers on. And if we being real with ourselves, we put a black teacher in front of it. Some of it lingers on in us too.
Right. No,
So
I agree
we have
with
to
you
be
100%.
real.
I guess I was saying from the perspective of, I don't want us to fall into that trap where we're saying that our students cannot achieve or they can't score well. I think if they don't have the resources, or if teachers don't have the proper resources, then that affects how they learn and that affects what they learn. To a degree it does, because if you if I'm taking spelling tests and as a sophomore year in high school and then I go out to a different district and they got all this technology and stuff, that's going to affect how I learn.
But you're not wrong about that. If you want to say give our black kids the work, give them the real work, then
On
just say
grade
that.
level.
We ain't got to say that
Yes.
that's replacing something
Right.
else. Yeah.
No, I agree with that.
Right.
But why aren't we holding students accountable? Like,
no. I believe in that. Hold on.
I
said
I was confused there.
Blame and accountability are two different things.
Right.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So I can hold a student accountable, but I'm not blaming him for the position that they're in. You see what I'm saying?
Exactly.
I'm going to hold you accountable all day.
Because it's a system that was already messed up before they got there. So,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
So, well, one, there very much is an achievement gap, and there's a couple things I wrote down. When you defined opportunity gap as relative to arbitrary circumstances, people want to refer to opportunity gap because that leaves them in the gray.
Talk to the mic.
Okay, that's the same thing that we did when we wanted to just promote growth, and look at all the schools now. All of the data that was just read about these schools is because we took our focus off of performance.
That's
and
right.
we started
Efficiency.
to then mask all of these amazing successes because they grew from second grade to third grade, but they in the 12th grade. And
Preach.
so when we talk about the achievement gap, that then forces you to hone in on performance, not just of the student, but also of the school and of the leader and of the teacher.
That's right.
So it's not that I'm necessarily disagreeing with, you said it was the former CFO of TFA, it's that he took the safe route. He
Yes.
took the safe route in that because then blame can't be, then you can't target blame anywhere. It's an arbitrary circumstance. Well, you know what? We can't live in the gray, and our children are dying by the numbers.
No, that's not. You're right about that. Okay. Dinkins, you want to weigh in?
Well, no, because I mean, so I'm living through my personal experience, right? So I got a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old, going to be 7-year-old.
Talk to the mic.
And also in my doctorate work, I did a lot of early childhood literacy, right? So there's research that tells us that children's performance is directly tied to the vocabulary of their mother, right? Tons of it. I mean, tons
The first
of it.
3 years. Or the
Tons of
formative.
it, right? And I was also on the Pathways coalition to get early childhood literacy for our communities. So what I've learned, and we put our babies in Turning Point, right? It's right there on Post Road. Beautiful school, right? All these mamas that look like my mama coming out of Jamestown bring their babies in that school every morning, clean, looking ready to learn. And from 3-year-old, they learn how to sit, how to learn, how to grow. I don't care what community you came from, how poor your mama is. You're going to learn how to learn in a structured environment. That's a high accountability. I'm developing language acquisition. I'm learning how to internalize what you tell me so that if anybody tells me anything, I can learn, right? And then I'm working at some innovation schools in the city, and their mamas wait till they bring them until they almost in a first grade.
Right,
They ain't
5.
sat in nobody's class.
Yeah.
They ain't been exposed to no literacy. And I said, man, I wonder how far along I would have been if my mama would have put me in school at 3 and
Right.
4. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so we and then also in some of these schools, they got teachers practicing how to teach. Right, I'm trying to learn how to teach
Right.
the most in
Vulnerable.
need children.
Right.
So, and research tells us you put the most need children with the highest performing teachers, so you
Right.
can close the gap.
Right.
So you got teachers learning and practicing. I don't even know how to teach yet,
Right.
but you gave me your child that's 3 years behind. They're gonna get a half year's growth.
Right.
Then they're gonna go to the next grade and get another half year's growth because they in their first 2 years program, then they out of there. So, I mean, there are a lot of dynamics that I think as a community, we have to learn how to control. First thing, I'm just an advocate of get your baby in school as soon as
Early
as
childhood.
early as you
Yes.
can so that they can learn and grow and be prepared. Because you can educate your child at home
Right.
if they have the necessary skills to do it.
So when you say get your child in school as early, I mean, that opens up a whole nother issue
It
when we talk about
does.
inequity because pre-K, let's just talk about getting your child into pre-K. So some of our most vulnerable families cannot get their children into pre-K. Why? Because they don't have transportation to get them there. And I don't want to call out school districts, but they do not provide transportation for pre-K students. So if we know, like you said, that growth in the child's education and all of that is like formed like just in 0 to 3, that's when they're the most impressionable, but yet we have a system in place that won't even allow, I think you have to be 4, but still you're on that cusp, that first 4 years of their life, that won't even allow them to be a part of the system.
But you say opportunity too. So if I'm a preacher and I have a congregation of 8,000 members, that should be a primary dialogue in my church that your
Well, that
children
ain't
should
happening.
have. And also, I mean, because the townships, they build early learning centers
Right.
so that they can get children in early because they understand. But you're talking about opportunity. So how are we as a community educating our parents about access? How are we taking on the responsibility of creating access? And that's just one dynamic, right? Just early, getting started early is one dynamic. And then the other dynamic, I think, is accountability for parents to understand who's teaching their children, the quality of teacher that's teaching their children. Because my baby is in, I'm going to say it, in a Lawrence school. She was in a class last year in a Spanish immersion school. The first year, the teacher was unbelievable. This year, not as unbelievable. It's an A school, right? So the primary variable is the teacher. In my personal experience. And so we're like, and my wife has been a school leader. I've been a school leader. We like, So we go see the principal. So, I mean, it's a lot of dynamics that I think we must inform and educate parents. We talked about empowering students. We got to do the same with parents so they know what they can do to get what they deserve.
I think you
ahead.
said something telling, Cassandra. You said that the school districts aren't providing the transportation. One of the, and I'm not trying to let school districts off the hook, but they don't operate in a vacuum. So we got to understand the school districts have a budget to work with.
I
If
know.
they can't use that budget to provide transportation, they would have to take it from somewhere else.
Right.
But because they don't operate in a vacuum, we still got somebody else to hold accountable to give them more money to provide the
That's
transportation.
what I'm saying, to
So we
address
need
the
to
inequity.
attack the state house, the municipalities, and get them involved.
That is
to
my
make
point,
sure-
especially if we know that pre-K is an important part and necessary for especially our students of color.
See, okay, so recently I'm sorry for pointing.
Go ahead.
Recently, I have been going after superintendents and boards of education across the township,
Yes, you
across
have.
the county, because of that very reason right there. They're not telling us what they want us to advocate for. It's almost as if the townships believe that they're going to solve this complicated problem, which I will concede has external factors that have to be accounted for, and they're just not. They haven't said, hey, this is a problem that's bigger than us and we need the support of the community at large. We need the mayor involved. We need Indigo involved. We need all sorts of other institutions involved in this particular issue of the achievement gap. And so that's been my frustration. And so, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Ashley, you want to weigh in?
This topic is so heavy for me. I just feel like we have such a great level of privilege to even be able to begin to sit here and decide achievement gap versus opportunity gap. I agree with what you said, Dinkins. We need to do better with empowering our families, just even on knowing what this is. And I think this will be a great, larger conversation, and that's why organizations like what we're working to build with Empower Families is one thing that I'm hoping to do personally is just shining the light on this more, because I mean, as a marginalized, I represent many marginalized communities here today. Just to name that, I don't have the luxury a lot of times, or before even starting this role, I didn't have the luxury to even think about test scores.
Right.
Or so, me sitting here today, I'm leaning more towards the opportunity gap. I don't have we didn't have access to resources.
Right.
Some days transportation was iffy.
Yep.
We could get into Turning Point, but it costs a whole lot.
Exactly.
And sometimes it maybe, you get vouchers or whatever, but then there's that level of care that you receive as a parent that's kind of iffy too. Like they treat you different.
Right. And that's
when
why
you come in there with benefits and stuff. So it's
Right.
like, it's,
That's why I
it's
say
so heavy for me.
Yeah, and that's why I probably lean more towards the opportunity gap, because I go off my experience. I was one of those poor kids growing up, and it was more about opportunity than it was my capability. And so that's why I come from that angle of just my parents didn't have access. And again, pre-K, if you can't if a parent does not have access to transportation and they cannot get their child there, what is that? That's not right. That's not fair for the child. Like, so we're just saying that they can't start their education journey because the school district isn't going to provide transportation. That's a whole vulnerable population. When we look at even the city of Indianapolis, that's a vulnerable population of students that just are not being educated until they get to kindergarten.
I'm gonna push. You got white children on the South Side to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And they still outperforming our
They're
black
still
kids.
outperforming our kids.
Right? They're having the same experiences, and they're still outperforming our kids. There was a study that was done where
And so why do you think that is?
black men, because when people see a white child,
Yeah.
they see
So you go
someone
back
who
to
is
the
worthy of
expectations.
learning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Beliefs and
They see
expectations.
someone who is worthy
So it's
of